Are we live?
Oh. We are live now.
Hi, YouTube. I'll just kick this off, if that's all right. So this is a high-level brand messaging project that we've kicked off to improve and sort of solidify our brand messaging. And we have an agency, New Kind, on who I've worked with before, and I think is perfect for this project. And today the goal is really to get inside Sid's head a little bit deeper on how he thinks about our message and our value proposition. So that's the context. And I think New Kind's done a great job of preparing, but I'll turn it over to them and go from there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Todd. So this is Jonathan Oplin. I'll be answering, or I'll be asking some of the questions today, and some of the other members of the New Kind team will chime in. And part of what we wanted to do, and thank you, Sid and Todd, for taking the time to do this today, is we know that GitLab is a company that lives up to its values. And because you live up to your values of collaboration and transparency, you've provided us an enormous amount of content and information to review. And from strategy documents to vision to videos that have been posted publicly, and it's been just an enormous resource for us. And so we've watched and we've read a lot, and there's probably still a lot more for us to watch and read. But what we're really looking for today is not necessarily the what of this detail. We're really looking for the why. So why do you believe what you believe? In your own words, and particularly in light of the new world that we're all in, now that the world has caught up to GitLab being in an all remote environment where all of us are learning how to work in this very distributed, concurrent way. Now that the world has caught up, we're looking for a way to help you elevate that story, and to tell that story. How do we take advantage of the DevOps message, the everyone can contribute message, and really weave those together to create a broader story about why this company exists and why it matters. So that's what we're looking for today. So the first question that we wanted to ask, and really for all of these questions, they're just meant to be threads to guide this conversation. And so we're not looking to necessarily replace a lot of the existing content or message that you have, as much as elevate that, and to help combine this product vision that you have with this culture vision, because it's so rare for us to see a company that really lives and breathes its culture from the top down, inside out. So let's jump right in. So our first question, in your view, what's working best about the GitLab story that we're communicating today?
I think that customers understand that we are more transparent because it's very obvious from the outside. And then if we show like the issue trackers and the roadmaps, they're like, yeah, okay. And the pricing page, yeah, okay, that's easy to grasp. And then our most important value prop is complete platform as a single application. I think that's gone from only we believed it to our competitors believed it, to the analysts are now starting to believe it with the Gartner market exploration for DevOps platforms. I think we're on the cusp of customers starting to believe in MS. I think right now, the only customers who believe it are the customers who use GitLab and use a couple of stages. They're bought in. We have a subset of customers who are not yet bought in, and the vast majority of the people who are not GitLab customers, I think, are still clinging to point solutions.
Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, the world has caught up in that sense for the value of a complete DevOps platform.
Well, if you say the world, like what's the world? Like, the world that matters to us is our potential customers. Mm-hmm. And the majority of that has not caught up. But there's leading indicators that it's going to happen.
Great. So what would you say is maybe not working as well, or what could be evolved? Are there messages that aren't resonating?
Shadows, by the way, anybody who wants to help take notes in the doc, feel free.
I think that it's still abstract. There's like, okay, why there's a complete platform in a single application? Why is it better? In an abstract way, people get it. I think it's still hard to visualize. We've experimented a couple of years ago with small videos of like, this is your alternative and things like that. We haven't really nailed that. So I think it's hard to make that case in a way that is practical, visual, and hard to refute. And I think the same is the case for kind of our higher tiers. Our paid tiers are very good value for money, but we don't, I don't think we do a great job communicating them.
Is there a reason why that message is difficult to communicate?
So we're going back to the complete platform, single application.
Yep.
I think like, why is it better to work in a single application? Well, because everyone's on the same page. Well, to show that, you need to show two people kind of looking at the same thing. That's hard to visualize. It's better because you don't have to hop between multiple applications to achieve something. That's easier to visualize. We tried that. Not super stoked about the results. You have a ton of integration works to do. So we made like flow graphs that I can show and are public. But I'm not sure it's not, the abstract story gets like, yes, that makes a ton of sense, I think, but there's nothing to kind of, there's always going to be skeptics who are wedded to the current point solutions. And yeah, it's harder to get through to them.
I'm just going to add to that. We've tried analogies. Like we tried the iPhone analogy, which actually makes a lot of sense. And for some audiences, it worked really well, and others it fell flat. For like sitting in an investor meeting, it actually works pretty well because they're like, oh, I get it. You used to have a calendar, you used to have a phone, and you used to have a music device, and now you have all of those in one. That's crazy. So, but they all seem to like work for one particular audience, but fall flat somewhere else. And that's been a hard thing to do. I think it's a complex story. It's not a complex story, but it maybe feels.
We have a complex version of the story.
Yeah. And it almost feels a little unbelievable too, which makes it harder to do.
Yeah, I think that used to be the main objection. Like it's too good to be true. And I think we've with the maturity page, we've done a good job of kind of refuting that, as in like, oh no, look, you can see to what extent it's true and not true and how much progress we're making. So I think that part of it has been working.
Great. So we saw your overview of concurrent DevOps, and it's a terrific explanation. Can you tell us about what that current state of that message is? Is that resonating? Is there still any concern around whether the word concurrent, where people able to engage with it really quickly and easily? Is there any concern about that, or is the message starting to resonate?
Yeah, I think, Todd, correct me. I'm not sure about my timeline, but I think we made that messaging before Todd got here, and I don't think Todd was bought in, so I don't think we've pursued it since.
Well, I think what ended up replacing it was DevOps platform, single application for, a complete DevOps platform delivered as a single application ended up sort of replacing it as the thing we talked about mostly.
Yeah, and I think look, you tell us you're the experts, but I think DevOps platform, Todd was totally on the money with that. And that's now starting to become the product category.
So what about at a really high level, the overall story that we're telling? We talked about everyone can contribute. And I know we want to get to talking about everyone contribute a couple questions from now. But can you tell us about that, the current state of that message as a higher level story that you're telling? Is it something that you're actively using, or is it more common for you to use like complete DevOps platform as the story you tell?
Yeah, I think everyone can contribute. We do it a lot when we talk about the company, when we talk about the wider community that contributes to the product. We don't use it as much when selling the product. The thing is, if you're selling the product, everyone can contribute is true. Like with GitLab, by having everything in a single application, it becomes easier for individual contributors in that organization to contribute. But it's the person you're talking with doesn't experience that problem. The person you're talking with is not an IC, it's a decision maker. And they're much more interested in compliance and overviews and control. So you're kind of, it might be used for like a grassroots campaign or something like that, but it's the marketing message to the buyers. I think we've not used it that much because of that reason.
Okay. So question number 3, what are the most common perceptions of GitLab that might exist today that we want to change?
I think the most common perception is that we're behind GitHub, while we're in fact ahead. And you can see that on the comparison page. If you click the toolkit there, you can see some examples of how GitHub is catching up to us. And you see it in what GitHub is releasing right now. But if you see those releases, like there's 1,000 responses and no one mentions, oh, it's been in GitLab for 2 years. And that's because we've come from behind. We used to be behind. We've overtaken it, but I don't think that's clear to people.
Mm-hmm. So are there any, in addition to that, are there any other obstacles do you feel like we need to overcome in our messaging or from a brand point of view? You know, beyond comparing technical features?
We still have the problem of, it still happens to me. First time we talked about GitLab, I think we talked about GitHub. And so we still have that problem, is people still say GitHub, I mean GitLab. Mm-hmm. I had a person reach out to me 2 weeks ago who's like, oh, I saw this job on your website. This person used to work for me. I saw this job on your website. I was wondering, I think I'm a really good fit for it. I was like, that's GitHub. You may want to call them. So it still happens. It's not as bad as it was 2 years ago, for sure. I don't think, I think the investor community kind of knows we're different, but I think there is still something there that feels like we could work on.
And one of the ideas hiding in plain sight that's really obvious is what makes a lab different. Curious the meaning of the word lab to you, and what is the idea of a lab? What does it conjure up? What are some of the feelings that it represents?
Yeah, and I didn't choose the name, but what does a lab represent? It represents a laboratory. It represents innovation.
Right. So getting into audience, in your words, what audience is the most important for us to persuade to help ensure GitLab success over the next 5 years? We've talked about the evolution from the developer audience, but can you tell us a little bit more about that? Who do we need to reach?
Yeah, so there's 2 axes to this. You have the level of the person in the organization, and you want to simplify it. It's ICs, managers, directors, and C-level executives. And that kind of lines up with our tiering structure. And we now make the majority of our money with our middle price tier with directors. And over time, we gotta get better in convincing C-level execs. Then you have the audience you're talking to. It used to be only developers, then also operations people, and now also security people. So we got to evolve from just developers to making sure that operations people feel it's part of their tool chain and security people feel that. Mm-hmm. I think surprisingly, we've made a lot of inroads with security people because we've allocate a lot of money to the security functionality, and that kind of changed over the last year, where they are like, oh, we tested the tool, it's actually better. There's still a long way to go there. Like I think the product is there. I think we can do better on the marketing. I think operations people, I'm not sure they recognize themselves in the product. So I think it's almost like we're not ready for the marketing yet because we haven't fixed the product there yet.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point. You've talked about the transition between dev into ops and potentially beyond. And that's one of the common themes that we've seen and we've read in your materials, is that the idea of software creation, it's a team effort, and it's a multi-team effort. And that effort has to be going on in concurrently, essentially. And it's never been more complex than it is today. And it's never had to move as fast. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that experience and how that ties into the next question of what big problem does GitLab solve that no other company can, and why that problem is so important to solve right now.
Yeah, so every company has to become a software company, or they'll be replaced by a software company. And to make software, you need talented developers and operations people and designers and security people and product managers. And the most important metric to focus on is cycle time. Get changes out faster. The faster you can get out a change, the more effective everyone is, the more motivated everyone is, the lower the risk is. I think this got captured pretty good in the Dora4 metrics for companies, and we can share that. Someone will put them in the chat if you haven't seen them. But cycle time is everything. And in order to have a fast cycle time, you can't be hopping between 10 different point solutions to get something out the door. At Goldman Sachs, their time to get their most application out the door went from 2 weeks to 2 hours with GitLab, because you didn't have to hop between different solutions. So it's the difference between sending a Word file as an attachment, emailing it between people, versus just all having a cursor in the same doc. Seeing changes of other people as they happen instead of way too late, and then kind of the waiting time adds up. So that's what we deliver, and that's something really, really hard. I think us and GitHub will be the only companies who will be able to pull off to have a complete DevOps platform offering.
Great. So this ties into our next question. And in many ways, you answered that with your last response is, if you could sit down with a CIO of any company who is looking at the competition, who is desperate to transform their entire software organization, and ultimately is looking to transform their entire organization and maybe even their industry with it, what would you tell them about the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead, and how GitLab can solve their problem for them?
Yeah, the problem they have right now is that they don't have enough developers, and the existing and when I should say engineers, and including the designers and everyone else, but let's say engineers for software people. So they don't have enough software people. And that's because the people they have are the best people they have are leaving at a rate bigger than the rest of the company. It's hard to attract new people. And most of all, the existing people they have aren't very effective. And that's the most important thing. And by bringing the cycle time down, you reduce coordination costs, you reduce cancellation, like things getting canceled before they get shipped. That's a way to make people more effective. It also increases motivation. Like the faster you get like a positive response to your work, the more you'll do. The shorter that games have a very short response time. They're very pleasant to do. Work tends to have a very long payoff. It's very unpleasant. The quicker you can make it, the better people will be, and the more effective they'll be, and the more they'll get done. And if you don't do that, like literally people come in the door, see like all those point solutions and the DIY DevOps platform you build on top because you had all those problems, and they'll walk out the door.
Yeah, we've heard you summarize the value as speeding up the cycles, being able to scale, help the company scale, and ultimately transform delivery. And is there messages or stories that you communicate to that audience to articulate the impact it will have for the company overall, even beyond the software development team?
I think the biggest, maybe show 2 slides and then continue further. And you might have seen these things, but so be it.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a sec. I just want to flash it on the screen because it was in chat, but people might be watching on YouTube. But this is like all the integrations you need between the different applications if you're not using something like GitLab. These are the Dora4 metrics. It's deployment frequency, lead time for changes, time to restore service, and change failure rate. These are really good metrics. But if I have to compress them to one metric, I'd say cycle time, the time between deciding to do something and getting it out there in the hands of real users and getting feedback from them. And that needs to go from weeks to hours in most organizations.
And in your own words, what's at stake for these organizations if they don't address this problem?
Sorry, I had a pause, but I wasn't done yet, and I realized.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please keep asking.
Yeah.
I think one framework you said is, look, the simple thing is like you're just paying too much by paying for all kinds of different tools. But that's the least interesting. Then commonly they have their most talented engineers working on making their own DIY DevOps platform because they had the point solutions and they weren't happy and they recognized the problem was too many tools. And instead of getting rid of tools, they added a tool on top of all of it to coordinate it. It doesn't work. These tools have different databases, different data models. They think differently about the world. You're not going to get an integrated experience. And so many people tried, and there is something better. But beyond saving that time and effort, a more important thing is like your developers are going to become more effective. Like you can do more work. You can produce more. And every company is struggling to hire software people because they're so in demand. The most important thing is revenue acceleration, innovation. Like if you release your changes one at a time instead of all bunched together every month, you're going to find out which ones actually make your business worse. That sounds trivial, but it's a big enabler. If you're able to respond to an event in a couple of days instead of a couple of weeks, you're going to make more money than the competition. That is the biggest lever that you have, and that's how it changes the business.
Perfect. Great explanation. So going back to my question I interrupted with was what's at stake if they don't? So developers will leave. What else?
They will be overtaken by a software company. Mm-hmm. I think every company will be running some kind of a SaaS service, and they might do a ton on top of that. But if I go to Disneyland, I'm going to be primarily interacting with that app to make my reservations and everything else. And if I go to if I'm a customer of Walgreens, that app is going to be a crucial interaction point with me. So every business, the front end of their business, the way they interact with the rest of the world is going to be a custom SaaS application. And the better that application, the better their business. And if they don't figure out a good application, some competitor will come along and figure out how to have a better front end.
Great. So getting into one of the key themes, we've talked a little bit about visibility. I'd like to get into visibility a little more as well, but this idea of everyone can contribute just being core to the mission of the company. Can you tell us how that came about and the role it plays, not only with the internal mission, but how it translates externally into the culture and even into the product and the platform itself?
Yeah. This GitLab started as an open source project, and it's really important not to lose that mentality. And we now see it as everyone can contribute on 3 different levels. People can contribute with GitLab, right? That's the most important thing we do. We enable people to contribute to Debian, to GNOME, to many awesome projects, open source projects, but also closed source projects. And the second step is like people can contribute to the product itself, to GitLab. We're very proud that we've seen an increase in the amount of contributions. We're about 300 contributions every month from the wider community. 300 things that make GitLab better that we didn't think of. And it's so important to us that, for example, in engineering, they now have a new metric, MRAR. And MRAR is fun to pronounce, but it stands for merge request times ARR. Every time they get a merge request, they multiply it by the ARR we're getting from that customer. Many times it can be 0 if they're not yet a customer, but we multiply that, and because we want our best customers, or not our best customers, but our most paying customers to be contributing as well. We know that GitLab should feel like something that is theirs as well. We think that will be great to improve the product. We think that will further improve gross and net retention. And and we think it will help with everyone can contribute. And then the third level on which people can contribute is to the company. Like, because we're so transparent, we do get people who say, oh, you should change this, you should change that. And I think it's easier to do that the more open you are.
Great. So if every one of our target customers adopted GitLab, how would the world be different in 5 years? Or maybe 10 years?
Yeah. So our target customers are basically every company in the world that has a manager in them and maybe adopted GitLab. You can have the connotation that it's becoming a customer. That's the first connotation I have, but they can also adopt it and use it for free. So that's basically everyone who produces software in the world. If they all use GitLab, a few things would happen. I'm going to go by that very simple matrix earlier, and that might be a bit lame, but lame is not a good word, but might be a bit of a cop-out. But they pay a lot less for software. They would have a lot less integration, time spent on integration, and the integration would be better because it's just a single app. They would have a development cost reduction, like they'd get more done with the same amount of people. And they'd be able to respond a lot faster to what's happening in the marketplace. If that would happen, I don't know, we have crazy stuff. I know, I signed up for, I practiced to learn how to DJ this holiday. Mm-hmm. And I signed up for a great site. It's called Beatport. I love Beatport, it's great. But I signed up with my email, but then when I set a username, apparently I could no longer use my email or something to log in. I don't understand exactly what happened, but like every site on the internet has like email password, at least as an option. And this one didn't. And it just gave me, like, I tried 5 times, I couldn't figure it out. they would see that a lot of people are getting stuck on that screen due to our product analytics, and they could use that data to then make an issue to improve that and roll that back out. I can give a couple of more examples of kind of fancy things you can do with GitLab. Is that helpful?
It is helpful because I think we're getting to that spirit of what does the world look like when everyone can contribute, and what needs to be possible in order for that to become reality. And I think you're capturing the spirit of that as a high level unifying story. You need to, first of all, you need visibility. You need to be able to see, but you need a space to collaborate and to experiment and to improve your cycle times and to get people involved. And again, going back to that core idea of how the world has evolved in such a short time in a post-pandemic world, that people are catching up to GitLab. They are learning how to be more collaborative, even though they might not be in similar spaces, that everyone is just learning how to be more collaborative naturally. And you are taking a leadership position in that. And it's core to open source. It's core to the principles that you live by and that you work through. So yeah, with any other analogies or ways for us to help tell that story, we'd certainly love to hear them.
I could go on about a lot of like features in GitLab that make it easier for everyone to contribute. And that's all the way from review apps to visual reviews that make it easy to give comments. I also want to, like, if everyone in the world would adopt GitLab, I think we'd have two flywheels spinning really fast. I think we'd see more broader adoption. Like, we know that for every additional stage, we have 10 stages in GitLab, the different pieces of functionality. For every extra stage people adopt, we triple conversion. So I think we'd see a rapid growth in the number of stages an average user would use. And that's because the number of wider community contributions would go off the scale. Like, if the whole world's adopted, the whole world is running into problems, and you get many more contributions. You get thousands of contributions every month instead of 300. Now, 300 is already great, and it's a lot more than the 30 that it was like 2 years ago, but it would go off the charts, and every month we'd be able to ship a lot more value to everyone involved. So kind of the more people join, the better the product, the faster the product gets better.
That's fantastic. Going back to that idea of everyone can contribute and the value of that. Great. So when employees or members of the community tell the GitLab story, what do you feel is the most important thing that you want to make sure the audience can hear?
Cool. I don't know. Something that comes to mind maybe with which I think is interesting and which I want you to hear. So if you contrast us and GitHub, it's both of us have an open source and a closed source aspect to us.
5 minutes remaining.
Thanks, Tanya. GitHub hosts the most open source. So like, they host the projects, but the application itself is closed source. We're the opposite. Most of GitLab hosts closed source. It's used by companies and enterprises to deliver that custom application that's their front door. But the application, GitLab itself, is open core. Like, everyone can contribute to it. And it's funny to me that it feels to me that it's super fundamental that the application itself is open source. And still, I think in the market, GitHub is perceived more as an open source company. And I think that's funny.
Yeah.
And there's some energy there to play with.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Todd, what about you? Ask you the same question. What do you feel is the most important thing that you want to make sure the audience hears?
think it still comes back to we're a complete DevOps platform delivered as a single application, because I think people want to know what GitLab is. And I think GitLab is different things to a lot of people depending on how they've experienced it. To many people, originally GitLab was a version control system. To many people, GitLab is an open source project. To many people, GitLab is a CI solution. To now, in 2021, to many people, GitLab is this really cool all remote, the largest all remote company in the world. So I think it's hard because it's hard to pick, but I think definitely just what is GitLab? It's a complete DevOps platform. Yeah.
I'll have a stab. I think what they're all, we talked about the shortage of software people. I think there's two other trends that are happening. You have the explosion of microservices. Like you got so many more projects. Then you have the tool per service explosion. Like DevOps used to be, you have some version control and CI, you're done. Now it's like 80 different things. If you look at GitLab, it literally can replace 80 different point solutions. Now you combine these two. You have many more services and you have many more tools per service. That means the number of tool service integrations is going through the roof. It's exponential growth. And that's what's holding companies back. And it shows up as like, we have too many tools to hop through before we get there. Or most of our projects don't have the majority of our tools configured. Stuff is not secure. Stuff is not being logged. Stuff is not quality controlled. And the solution to that is a platform that does all of it. And I think that's what's going to happen this year. And that's what we should accelerate. Hey, instead of trying to buy better in point solutions or build the DIY DevOps platform, we should just shift to a platform. And then the next realization is, okay, there's two options. And GitLab is way ahead in the current feature set. Plus, they're shipping as much every month as the competition is shipping in a year.
Plus, they're transparent and you can contribute to it.
Well, that's why we're shipping so much. That's only going to accelerate going forward.
Well said. Well said. And that feels like a good place to end the conversation. And I think our last just addition we would add to that is if you have any advice for us as we continue on this journey together of helping to evolve this message and elevate this story, any advice?
I think Price intelligently did a great job of proposing what each existing tier, what the functionality should be that we highlight. I'd love for you to review that. And if someone digs that up for you, please send it to me too, because I'd love to link it from somewhere. And I forgot where the link was to that presentation.
Okay.
Great. 1 minute time check.
Good. I think we ended perfectly.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for all the